Blink. Oh no, I didn't get the signs ready. 3, 4. Do 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 do. Rada bap 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 beep boo. Dee dee da dee da da da. Hey, you guys want to see something? This is a drawing that I began in 2008 and never finished. This is a mashup of 8 Ball number 4 and Incredible Hulk 291. Because on the cover of both, the main figure is about to blow his head off. So I thought it'd make it good. I still like it. I'm gonna try to finish it one of these days. That's why I put it here in my eye line, so I could see it and then feel guilty for not doing anything about it. Instead of drawing, is getting high and masturbating. Hi, and masturbating, everybody. It's been rather a shit day for a new comic book day, but you know what? New Mandalorian. I don't give a fuck anymore. He's the Mandalorian. Lands a Handalorian. Doesn't drive a Chevy Vandalorian, but a 85 DeLorean. Those lyrics are copyright me. I'm very excited. There's not many shows that I watch weekly. Saturday Night Live and the Seth Meyers. And I watch like once a week. I watch all the highlights for the week. Those are the only things I think I watch weekly. Everything else is just kind of working at shows that everybody else watched 5 years ago. But I actually have watched them, even though I only had Disney Plus for a short time. My friends for whom I house sit in Long Beach and who I've done this from whose apartment I've done this dumb little thing. I watched it all over there, like right around when Book of Boba Fett came out. I think it was like I watched the first 2 seasons, and then a few months later, Book of Boba Fett came out. And boy, do I love it! It's exactly my thing. It's set right after Jedi, which is my favorite movie of the series, and it's essentially a western. And I mean, I don't know why it took them so long to come up with a Star Wars western, but I'm glad they did. So I'm going to try to keep these brief for the next 8 weeks or however long the season is, 10 weeks. And good luck to me with all that. First up, Phantom Road #1. This is by Jeff Lemire and Gabriel Walta. And as I said in my recommend for the shop this week, that's all I needed to hear. Jordy Belair also on colors. It doesn't hurt, generally speaking. The colorist, who cares? But no, I've come to appreciate colors. I think the industry has come to appreciate it. They get like third billing now, which it was always writer and artist, writer and penciler at least. Anyway, I don't know what it's about, and I don't want to, so that's why that's first. Also up, I got Red Zone #1 from the good people at AWA. This is like with every book, it seems they do a variant that looks like a movie poster, and sometimes I don't generally like variant covers, but sometimes one gets not it's not like it never happens, but yeah, you can even see the crease where it would be if it was an actual poster, and it's Deodato on top of that. So who can complain? This is another one I don't know much about, but it is to do with the Red Scare. Anything USSR related, I'm super into. I was a small boy in the 1980s. Kids gather around, and so terrified by the Cold War. I was 8 years old, and I was told that I was to be. If I lived in Russia, I would have to pick apples all day. I was like, well, how is that worse than having to sit through fucking public school? Asked third grade me. I got my mouth washed out. And then when I was 11, I was told that the Russians had missiles pointed at every single one of us, including me. And I was like, I just started getting boners, right? I don't need to hear about a fucking missile pointed at me. So then when I got into high school, and by then the Berlin Wall had fallen, and, Yeltsin was in there drinking it up. So it wasn't really, the Russians weren't a threat anymore. And I remember there was an issue of Raw. I want to say it was volume 2, #1. but there's probably more than one issue of Raw, that has this. But there was like a lot of, it might have even been a Drew Friedman thing about Red Scare stuff. It might actually, no. Now I think it was just an article. It was mostly text, but it had like anti-commie trading cards of the 1950s and stuff like that, and I love that sort of thing. Um, so again, I don't know anything about it, but it's Cullen Bunn and Mike Deodato. I mean, Deodato has been a tremendous artist for like 20 years now, and AWA is like his new home after being at Marvel for a couple decades. It's written by Cullen Bunn, who many years ago wrote a book called The Sixth Gun. Speaking of westerns, it was like a supernatural western. Tremendous book, incredible book. It wasn't his first thing, but it was his first thing that broke. And from there, he started writing a lot for like Dark Horse and Image. He writes a lot of horror books and stuff. And not to speak ill, but I sometimes it got to feel like I was like, yeah, I think you might be spreading yourself a little thin there, Mister Bunn, because instead of having one really good book, he would have like five fine books, and so I had kind of lost my taste over the years. For like, I used to buy his after Six Gun, I bought all of everything he wrote, and that's like steadily declined over the years. But I think I just read something by him not that long ago, and I can't remember who, but or what, but he still got it. I'm not trying to say anything else to the contrary. And then also from the upstart Marvel Comics group is Cosmic Ghost Rider #1. I don't know why they decided to bring this character back out of nowhere. Chances are it has something to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But who's to say? I mean, the guy was this is not a very old character. And I'm sure I've gone on at length about him before, so I will not do so now. This is written by Stephanie Phillips, who I think I looked up and is not related to Sean or Jacob Phillips. Phillips is a pretty common name. It's drawn by Juan Cabal, who I think drew some of the other series, though I honestly can't remember. He's also one of the Stormbreakers, one of the kind of, every year Marvel does like this kind of, the Young Guns, I think it was originally called. The hot new artists, and I think Juan Cabal's in there. Even though most of the time they're artists who have been working in the industry for some time, it's just Marvel's deigned to acknowledge them. But yeah, this is always fun. Created by Donny Cates for the Thanos series from 2017. Cosmic Ghost Rider is in fact Frank Castle, the Punisher, but from the far flung future, and he's also insane. So it's always fun to read that character. In Picks of the Week, what did you read last week, Jim? Well, I'm glad you asked. Now, I think I've mentioned as much before, but it has felt to me recently that comics are kind of in a bit of a lull, and it's also I'm very 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 aware that you know you read comics or as fanatically and as analytically as I have for the last 21 years. I mean, I started collecting in '88, but it wasn't, and then I stopped for a while, and then I came back in '01. So it's been an unbroken streak for the last 21 years and change now. I might just be burning out. I mean, there's eventually going to be nothing new under the sun. But so I have last week's picks of the week, but then I have a couple other ones that I just read and wanted to share. Now, first, I'll start with this one because Local Man was really good. This is written by Tim Seeley, and Tim Seeley's my age, and he grew up with Image Comics, so this makes perfect sense. Our main character here, Crossshank or something like that, he's on a big dumb Image superhero team, which I think is, and they're called 13th Gen or something like that, which I guess is like a reference to Gen 13, which was an actual big stupid Image comic in the '90s. But he has moved home in shame. I don't think they've actually established what it is that he did to cause him to be such a pariah. But eventually we'll get back to it. This is how the Image bullpen page used to look back then too. Not that they did it a whole lot. And then in the back they'll have a flip book where it's the his superhero. So it's realistic superheroes. This is something that Image actually should get a little more credit for. But since Image isn't primarily a superhero publisher, I don't think anybody really gives a poop. But I feel like books like Crossover, when Image started, it was all by Marvel guys, and very typical to Marvel guys, and they were young too. I mean, Liefeld wasn't even old enough to drink. Not that he drinks. So all their ideas were very, very derivative, and they just looked like superheroes of the time, which means they looked like Marvel superheroes. And right away, they also established that it was a shared universe, and there was Shadowhawk would cross over with Spawn, would cross over with Savage Dragon, and I was like, yeah, cool. A shared universe is fine. It very quickly got to where I didn't give a poop anymore. But what also has come with this company, with this full self publishing, or not self publishing, creator owned publishing, is that it becomes they'll so this is like a superhero book, but it's a little more realistic, a little more serious. There's swearing and stuff like that. And yeah, I like it. I'm looking forward to the rest of this series. Now I want to make clear that the next two books I read are not bad. They just left me a little cold here and there, and I'll explain why. First up is Blue Book #1, and this was great. This issue features the story of Barney and Betty Hill, and in fact, it doesn't complete the story. It's very good, Michael Oeming artwork. It's a good story. I mean, I know I've read the story before. This is a very famous Close Encounter of the Third Kind. So, well, Jimmy, if you liked it, then what was your problem with it? Here's my problem with it. It just fucking ends. I am getting real sick of this, dude. For some time now, the trade paperback has really supplanted the weekly floppy book, as they used to call them, as the main way that people ingest comics. They would rather wait for the collected story in one go, and they could just read it at once. They don't want to go through the hassle of collecting the whole series. Now, I have a ton of fucking trades, and I read them all the time. And I'm glad that they're more prevalent, because when I was a kid, they were not. There was not that many trade paperbacks around, and you can read a lot of old stuff that way. That's how I use trades, to read old stuff. But a lot of people buy them now just when the series is done. So when this hits issue 6 and then the trade comes out, a bunch of people will just buy that. Fine. I'm fine with that. But as inevitably happens with this sort of thing, it begins to affect the storytelling process. So now instead of a series of 6 issues, we're just reading chapters. And they're not even very well established chapters. I guarantee you that when I go back, and I'm going to try to remember to do this, but I probably will forget. But if you look at the trade paperback, I guarantee you it goes from this page to the next page seamlessly. If the rest of the car is in the next page, I would not be surprised. Just do a fucking trade if that's what you want to do then. That's what I don't understand. Why do they still bother with these if they're not really going to do them? Because they know I'll buy it? I guess so. But, I mean, they keep this sort of thing up. It feels like, you know, fuck. I mean, really, since COVID, sorry for swearing so much. Really, since COVID, it seems like the industry has been on a precipice. And it's like at any moment, it's just going to collapse in on itself, like Mad Magazine did. But, I don't know. It's just fucking lazy, frankly. Do one or do the other, but don't try to have it both ways by selling me a $4.99 book that has a shit ending. Just drops off. It doesn't even have like a to be continued or anything like that. They're completely doing away with any of that kayfabe, and yeah, it kind of pisses me off, frankly. From a nerd standpoint, yeah, but also just from a story junkie standpoint. If your story doesn't end, then what are we fucking doing? Why'd you start? Nothing. I'm still going to read the book and enjoy it, but that sort of thing is starting to get up my nose. Also, this week I read Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, Captain Britain #1. It was fine, but here's my problem with this book now, and they've been doing this with the X titles for a couple years now, and it's also starting to get old. as I mentioned last time, when the X line like kind of just restarted at number one, and they released like X-Men, New Mutants, and then new titles like Marauders and Hellions. I guess Hellions, there had been a Hellions title in the 90s, but Excalibur was another one. And then like a lot of these books, like X Factor, they went with the detective agency X Factor as opposed to the original lineup X Factor. And then it was starting to flag, so they did the Trial of Magneto story, and that was X Factor kind of ended on that note. They did a similar thing with Excalibur, where it became Knights of X, and I kind of lost interest at that point. And now, like I was saying last week, it's back into this where it's really just a continuation of Knights of X. So I have no goddamn idea what's going on. So there's a whole bunch of exposition, and that's where my real problem with this book comes in. There's one fight between Betsy Braddock, or not between, Betsy Braddock and a bunch of other Captain Britons fight alongside the T-Rex Captain Britain in that dinosaur dimension. And that's it for the action. All the rest of it is blah diddy bling diddy blue diddy blee. And if I had read Knights of X, I'd probably know all this stuff, or at least a chunk of it. And I wouldn't need it all told over again. And if they just kept it at fucking Knights of X instead of starting it over with another number one, so a bunch of schnooks will jump in on it like me, well, I'm going to feel kind of ripped off, frankly. And then I was like, this is just Knights of X number 23 or whatever the fuck where they left off with it. And this is the sort of thing that I'm the calmest person you're going to see in regards to this topic. A lot of guys won't even fucking buy X-Men anymore. There's guys that come in the shop and trust me, they'll let you know, who haven't bought X-Men in years for this or that infraction. Now, frankly, I don't give two shits what anybody else does, but this is the sort of thing that's going to just kind of push readers away and is going to drop sales, and then the whole goddamn thing is going to start to finally collapse. And then I'm left with, I got to find something else to do with my Wednesdays. Also, and God, I sound like such a white man when I'm going to say this, but Betsy and Rachel Summers, she's gone by many names. I'm not even sure what the hell her name is nowadays. She was Phoenix when I was a kid, and she is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from an alternate dimension. She ended up on Earth, and she joined Excalibur for a while. She was in the dimension that she came from. She was used by the fascistic ruling class as a dog to hunt down other mutants. And then she came here and they had to rehabilitate her. And she's been in like the Krakoan age of X-Men. She's been a player, like she's been around. And now all of a sudden Betsy and her are dating. Now look, I'm all for more representation. I'm all for I'm all it's they made Iceman gay a few years ago, probably like 10 years ago. And I remember a lot of people, get so bent out of shape. But the way it was Brian Michael Bendis, and the way he did it, it worked. It made sense. It showed how, and I had just been reading at the time some early X-Men stuff, and Bobby is very not into girl stuff. And it's like, oh, okay. Now there's some meaning behind that. To my understanding, neither of these characters has ever been gay or even bi. And again, it doesn't. I mean, they could make it happen. Frankly, it feels like a fucking weak attempt at a Harley Quinn Poison Ivy thing, which is far more popular. I think that makes more sense. They're Batman villains. Why wouldn't they be? Plus, they're both smoking hot. It feels cheap. Is basically what I'm saying. It feels like a very cynical fucking grab for readers who are gay, and I would be insulted were I gay, but I'm not, so no one needs my fucking opinion on this. But I mean, I also realized that Tiny Howard wrote Strike Force back in 2019. I want to say maybe 2018, and I loved that book. It's so weird how like these writers when they come in, they give them shit books to write, and they kill it. And so they're like, "Oh, write Excalibur now," and then Saladin Ahmed did a similar thing. Cody Ziegler is kind of a similar. I mean, it's I don't know. I blame editorial, I guess, but why am I still talking? Fucking Mandalorian. All right. So here's a couple books though that I from this week I'm not caught up. I mean, it was a big week last week, but here's a couple that I read that I did enjoy that I wanted to talk about, and I have to remind myself why. This is World's Finest number 12 or Batman Superman World's Finest number 12 by the great Mark Waid and drawn by Emanuela Lupacchino, who I think I've read books like stuff before, but this is really good. So this issue is really pretty fun. Supergirl and Robin go on a date, and it goes a little sideways. You know, come to think of it, I'm not even sure which fucking Robin this is, if it's Damien or who. But I guess it might even just be Dick Grayson. This might be a story from the past. Oh yeah, it is Dick Grayson. Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is from back when he was still Robin. Unless he's now Robin again. I don't think that's right because Nightwing has his own title. I feel like there was another reason I grabbed this up to talk about, but now I can't remember. I think it was just because it was fun. And I think sometimes DC's a little better at that sort of thing. Or am I just bringing it up because I'm trying to reinforce heteronormative mores? You never know with me. This was the best thing I read this week, I think. This is One Bad Day Clayface. And I was always my Clayface was Matt Hagen because that was the Clayface on the Batman cartoon in the '90s. But Basil Karlo was the original Clayface, and this is his story here. And when these books started, these series of one shots started coming out, I thought they were just going to be origin stories. The One Bad Day, how they ended up being villains, but that has only I don't think that's been the case at all. I think most of them, well, all the stories just take place wherever they feel like. So this takes place in Los Angeles, and it's very LA. And it was I just finished Barry, and it's also very Barry. It's a guy, an actor, and he's killing a bunch of guys. It was really good, and it was written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, who are writing Captain America, the Steve Rogers Captain America, I believe. No, are they writing the Falcon? No, I think they're writing Steve Rogers. Um, but it was good. And now I'm gonna go watch my little show. Do better, comic books. I'm pulling for you. I'm rooting for you.